welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you, and go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of share your maker story and kind of what your business is.
Okay, so I'm Meghan. I run Meghan Makes Do, and I got my start about, almost 7 years ago. I'd always really been into anything artsy. I learned to crochet when I was 12, but made this wonky little baby blanket that the ends were all wavy. And kind of put it down for a little bit until I started college, and then I kind of got back into it because some of my friends knew how to crochet, so we would sit around the dorms not studying and crochet instead.
Awesome.
And then when I got married and kind of got settled down in Illinois, I was I really love, I was working full time as a preschool teacher, but I really wanted something that I could do outside of that, as a creative outlet, more than just a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually found out that the local farmers market allowed artisan vendors. So I applied and started making a bunch of, I made bags and pouches and crocheted hats and baby items. I made whatever I felt like making. I was just I'll just make everything. And started selling every Saturday. That was our routine. We'd get up super early, set up my booth, spend the whole morning at the market. And probably about 3 years in, I was making regular sales. It was really becoming something more. And I was I had all these great ideas. And then we moved to California. And I kind of had to start all over again. So it took me a while to kind of figure out what I wanted to do business-wise. I tried doing markets here, but they're very expensive. And I started to feel okay, it's getting a little tricky to handle, having kids full-time and doing the maker thing full-time, constantly producing more goods. So it wasn't until I joined Instagram more as a business, when I started taking it seriously as a business, as a marketing thing, that I found all these other people doing the same exact things that I was doing. And it was oh my gosh, there are other people like me in this world. And so getting to know other makers and then, seeing what they're doing inspired me to okay, I've got to start my blog. I've got to start this website. I've been telling myself I'm going to do this for years. It's time. So I think I launched my website and my blog in September 2017. And I started seeing that other people were designing. And I was oh, I don't think I could ever do that. I don't have the knowledge. I'm not an expert. I don't know how people do this. I can read a pattern. I could probably write one, but I don't know. But I was you know what? I have this idea for a scarf. I'm just going to try. Let me just try. If it's a total flop, if I fail, oh well. I don't have to show anybody.
Yeah.
And during that process of designing this scarf. So it's a triangle scarf, and it starts real small and gets bigger and then gets smaller, and it's got puff stitches in it. I use a lemon peel stitch, and it was it started to click for me, the math that it takes and how it all the increases and the decreases and how they match up and how to manipulate the stitches. And I was I love this. Oh my god. And so honestly, that first scarf, I tried to release it as a paid pattern. I don't think I sold one, not even one. And so I was oh gosh, maybe I can't do this. But I was you know what? No, I really am drawn to this design, process. I feel it challenges me in a way that just making and selling finished goods didn't. And it gives me that creative outlet that I was really craving. And so I kept going. I was okay. So then I actually right after I did the scarf, I think I had made this hippo that I was just making and selling as a finished product. So I made the pattern for that one. And I decided at that point, I was let me try free patterns on my blog and super inexpensive PDFs and see how this goes. Let me try it this way. And then I started seeing better results. I started seeing people visiting my blog posts and remaking my items. So I was okay, maybe that's where I need to go. So then I switched over to mostly free patterns on the blog, and now the PDFs, inexpensive PDFs. But I kept going and kept designing, and now it's almost an addiction. I can't stop. I love it so much, and I'm like, it's the whole idea of like, think of something and then you can create it, and then other people can create it. Like the whole process is just, I love it. So,
yeah, I love it.
I make project pouches. Like that's probably where most of my revenue comes in. But it's nice to be able to like spend like a week making pouches and sewing, and then spend the rest of my month just designing and creating and blogging. So yeah, it took me a while to finally, I guess, like find my sweet spot. And now I'm in it. I love it.
I agree. I started, and I'm still figuring out that whole balance of like the selling the patterns. Like I will sell, like I have a couple patterns that have sold, and then others where I just have it listed but they don't get bought. Yeah. But I'm starting to do more of the free patterns because I was talking with some other makers, and they're like, that actually will get you more revenue if you have the free patterns because it'll lead to more traffic and all of that. But it's so hard to figure out, like, and like, I love designing so much too. Like, I'm so addicted to making clothes. Like, I can't stop. I have to like stop myself so that I can actually write up the pattern because I'm just too addicted to it.
Yes.
Cool. So what we were going to focus on today is all about pattern writing and like what to include in patterns and how to like actually write them up. Because every designer has their own style. So how do you like kind of format your designs, or how do you write up your patterns?
So for me, like I always have a notebook with me anytime that I am designing, because I like to try to write out as much as possible during the process, because I know how my brain works and I will forget things. So I always am kind of writing things down as I go. So my notebooks look kind of crazy because I'll be like, if I have to frog something and change it, I'm like scribbling things out and trying to like figure out what I did. But I usually start there. It's like a rough draft kind of like in the book. And then from there, when it's all done and I'm like ready to like type it up, I usually start with my PDF actually. So I do mine all in PowerPoint. So I created one and I kind of just follow that same template. So I'll have like a title page that has like a picture of the finished design, the name of the design, my name, my website, and then the next page I have like the nitty-gritty details. So I'll have like my materials list. I have my abbreviations that I use. I've got my notes, the finished sizes, the gauge. All those important details are like right in the front. And then the next page is usually like if I've included any kind of special stitches or things I feel like are confusing for people, I'll have like little stitch tutorials in there, which is totally not necessary. But I'm a visual learner and I like to include as many visuals as possible. So I do include usually some kind of photo tutorial about the stitches, and then I'll get into the bulk of the pattern. And mine's really simple. Like it's not anything fancy. I use just like a simple font. It's just columns basically on the page. And so then I'll just start typing it out, and it's the more that I like do more complicated designs, the more it's like, oh gosh, like trying to figure out the best way to format it and write it out. Like my last garment design, I ended up changing it after the testing phase, and I'm writing like the first section is different for each size. And it was like getting really confusing, and I was like, okay, I'm just writing each size separately. So this pattern is like 16 pages long because each page, like each of the first couple pages are one size, takes up that whole page. But I'm like, as long as it's clear and people understand it, it'll be okay. And then like in the bulk of the pattern, if there's any kind of tricky parts, I'll usually throw some extra pictures in there too, just to make it clear so people hopefully won't have any questions. They'll be able to like sit down with my pattern and make it without being like, what am I doing? Yeah, and then at the very end, I usually have a couple more pictures of the finished product on the last page, plus my little like copyright disclosure. Pretty basic, pretty simple. I usually start there, and then if it's going to be a free pattern on the blog, then it's just a matter of kind of just copying and pasting it over into the blog post, which is super easy. So that's
what I do.
Yeah. And like my PDF is done. All right. I'm just copying and pasting it over, putting my pictures in, writing my little description of it. And kind of go from there. So it usually doesn't take too long. But yeah, it's as long as you're including like the main things, like your materials, your gauge, your size, your notes, your abbreviations. There's so like everyone's gonna write their patterns a little bit different.
True.
But yeah, it works.
Cool. Yeah, I do kind of a really similar thing. When I originally was like first starting my business, I never thought I was going to actually do garments. And so I was going to just do a bunch of like food plushies. And so I like started having all of my patterns be like crochet recipes. So I made it kind of look like a bakery recipe, but but now that I'm making clothes, I'm like, I'm still going to call it a crochet recipe in the pattern, but I very similar thing. Like I will have photos so everyone knows what pattern they actually have when they open it, and then do those things, same things that you listed, because I love including photos too, because I think that is really helpful, especially if you don't have like a video tutorial for it and you're a visual learner. I learn a lot better when I can see someone actually doing it. So
yeah, me.
So some of those things that you listed, would you say like those are the essentials of pattern writing, or what would you say are the essentials to always make sure that you include in your patterns every time?
Okay, I would say absolutely always include at least one photo. Like people need to be able to see what they're making, because like say you have like a picture of it in your listing, but then it's not when they like print out the PDF, they're gonna be like, you gotta have that visual. They want to be able to see it when it's printed out. Definitely your materials. And when it comes to materials, like it's okay to have every single thing you think people might possibly need, including like optional things like stitch markers. So try to always include like every single thing that you used, and then always include yardage. Like I know some people, I've seen some people use like just like putting like the number of skeins they need. But people are going to be using different yarn than what you used. It's just going to have, people are going to substitute. So if you can have the yardage, that's much more helpful than just number of skeins. So I always recommend like having your yardage in there as detailed as possible. And that's just a matter of like weighing your pieces or weighing your yarn before you use it, and then again after. To figure out how many ounces you use, and then converting that based on the label, which takes a little bit of and sometimes like I have discovered too, like now that I'm like weighing my skeins before I start, sometimes they're more or less than what the label says. So
interesting.
Okay, like maybe I didn't get my full money's worth here. But yeah, it's good to know like what you're starting with and then what you end with. Definitely gauge is like, gotta have gauge, even if it's not necessarily like imperative to meet gauge. People need to know, like, okay, is their tension on par with yours? Because that's going to help them get the right size. And so make sure you always have your gauge in there and the hook size you use. And I always recommend writing down the millimeters for your hook, too, because letters are going to be different depending on the brands. Like, every labels are different.
And in the UK, they don't use letter sizing at all. That's just a US thing. So.
Yeah. And then, I think... And something that I'm starting to include in mine that I think, I mean, maybe it wouldn't be necessarily essential, but I think it's really helpful, is putting somewhere on there if it is US or UK terms, and then putting the skill level as well, I think is really helpful, because, you know, people want to know, like, if they're a beginner, they want to know, can I handle this? Can I do this one? Because the worst thing would be if someone buys your pattern and then they end up not having the skills to make it and they didn't realize it at the time. So yeah, and then I definitely feel like notes are really helpful. Just so that people know any like special little things that they need to know about your pattern. So yeah, I guess all those things are essential, and sizes too, especially for garments. Garments, like people are gonna want to know what size it comes in, but then also like the finished size it should be. Because I've noticed with my patterns is my garment patterns always end up being too big. Like, I don't know if it's because, so I'm an extra large, so I always design things to fit me because I want to wear them. So I don't know if it's just that like I like things a little bit more loose and flowy, and so then my patterns end up being bigger. So it helps, like, you know, if you're like, because everyone's size is not going to be like a standard universal size. Like, everyone's patterns are going to be a little bit different.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I'm a size, like, I learned, like, if I want to have like form-fitting jeans, then I'm a size 4. But if I want to not feel like, because I'm got curvy hips, so I'm like a size 6 waist, but when I wear size 6 pants, like, they're so big on the legs, but I'm like, I want to be comfortable, so I'm gonna wear this.
Yes, exactly. So if you know, like, okay, you know, the finished size, like around the chest or whatever, across is going to be for a small, like, you know, it's like 18 inches or something. People will know, like, oh, okay, so the finished size is this. They can measure themselves and figure out, do you make a small? Do you make a medium? Like, or like if you're, you know, if your finished piece is oversized, like sometimes oversized sweaters, like those are really cute. Put that in your pattern to, like, say, hey, it's oversized, so it's going to have, you know, a positive ease of this, or I don't know, whatever it is that makes it clear for your customers to know what size they should end up with.
Yeah, yeah.
At them, which is something I'm kind of learning as I go with this.
Me too.
It's like, this is a whole new world for me. So yeah, it's definitely taking me a little bit longer than I thought to do a whole garment design process, but I like the challenge.
Yeah, my first garment design, the Bobble Sweater that I did, I still haven't gotten that out to my testers because I totally underestimated how hard it is to create cables out of bobbles for different sizes. So thankfully, because my husband likes math, he's done most of the math for it, but we're still, like, in the process of figuring out, and, like, since then I've done like 5 different garments on top of that are a lot easier. So I'm like, forget about that other pattern. That'll be my first pattern that I never release.
Right. It's hard. Like, so I made a goal this year, and it's been really hard to stick to, but I'm only working on one design at a time. Oh my gosh.
That's hard.
It is so hard. There have been so many days where I'm like, I just want to start something new. But I'm like, no. Like, and when I mean, like, one at a time, it's like, okay, if I can get my design from start to complete and out to testers, then I can start something new. So I'm like, yeah, that's so hard. You know, I'm taking it slower. I'm slowing down this year a little bit. And so far it's good. But yeah, there's times where I'm like, I just want to keep making, like, you know, I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop and write something out or figure out the math, because, like, the math in my garment pattern too, like, I'm like sketching out, like, stitches. Like,
I do that.
File with, like, the number of stitches, and okay, where's it decreasing here, and how is it going to decrease there, and where do I put these stitches? And it was like, oh my gosh, like, it makes your head hurt. Like,
yeah, I do the same thing when I do a raglan design. I'll just draw a bunch of squares going around each other, and I'll write, okay, on this one there should be this many stitches on these sides. And then I just keep going out and out, because somehow that helps me do the math better, just by being able to see it, because otherwise I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
Right? I know. Like, and I don't know. So when I started that top pattern that I just wrote, like, I had to figure out sizing, like, as I went. Like, for the top section, because it was so confusing to me. And I was like, I don't think I could figure it out after. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if I had chosen a more simple construction method, it would have been easier. But yeah, it's like the way mine was designed, it was like I do the yoke part first and then the bottom, and it was like, why didn't I just make a simple square? I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. But I'm really happy with the end result. So
good.
I definitely learned a lot, but yeah, the hardest part with that one was just figuring out the best way to write it so that it's not confusing. And that's what I feel like garment designs, like, I'll see ones that seem so simple and they're written so simply, and I'm like, how do I get mine to be like that? Like, mine are not not that simple. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so hard to translate, because when you have your notes, when you kind of like write the initial pattern, like, you completely understand it and you're like, this will totally make sense to everyone else, but then it's learning that whole thing of how can I make it so that other people can understand all the craziness in my brain how I made this garment? Because like when you make the garment, you totally know how to do it. You're like, oh yeah, I totally know how I did this, but then getting it written so that other people can use it, that is really hard to learn how you do it yourself, because everyone does it differently.
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, and just like the way to word things so they make and that's why like this year I'm hoping to eventually start. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm hoping to have more like video tutorials to go along with my patterns. I'm still learning that whole process of like trying to figure out how to take a video and watch myself in the screen.
Yeah. You get used to it after a while.
Yeah, I'm like, oh gosh, it's just, I'm like struggling. But yeah, so I think like I feel like a lot of creative people are visual learners. And so the more I can show people what I'm doing versus like just writing it out, I think it helps. But yeah, it's like writing a whole nother language, basically.
It's so true. TL Yarn Crafts had like she shared a memory of her husband reading out loud all of this and out loud a pattern at like just with the abbreviations, and she's like, yeah, we really do speak another language, and it's so true. It's so true. We can like, how do we translate all those abbreviations of different things? And have you found like with different patterns and how people write patterns that people use different abbreviations for different things, or how do you find like what abbreviations you want to use in your patterns?
So there are some standards that have been made through like the Craft Yarn Council. So if you go to the Craft Yarn Council website, I think which is just craftyarncouncil.com, they have standards on there. So like you can find like the standard abbreviations for all like the basic stitches for like knitting and crochet, as well as like standards as far as like how to write certain things, like what it means when you put brackets around stitches, or what it means to do the star and then repeat from star. And so I try to use that as much as possible. I try to stick to those standard abbreviations. Now it gets a little tricky when there isn't an abbreviation for a stitch that you're using. And so like for my Emerson scarf, that was my first design, I looked on their site and they don't have an abbreviation for lemon peel. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And I think it's because it's used with, it's just two other basics together. So I created my own. So I just used LP for lemon peel. And that's fine. Like you can totally do that as long as you're including your abbreviation like in your pattern. You just have to make sure that super clear to people that like that's what you mean. But yeah, if you stick mostly to like the standard abbreviations on the Craft Yarn Council website, you should be good. Like, and I find that most people do. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel and come up with your own abbreviations for things. It's all right there. And then yeah, if you come across something new or a stitch that you're like, there is no abbreviation, you can make up your own. So yeah, just include it in your abbreviation section of your pattern.
Yeah, I've found that with pattern writing, the Craft Yarn Council is probably the best resource for everything from like if you're doing different garments and garment sizing to like how like tech editors like patterns written or how to do abbreviations and stuff. There's so many good resources on their website that are, I feel like all garment designers are like, that's what we preach, is go on the Craft Yarn Council website.
Yes, and I feel like the more people use that as their guide and their resource, the more cohesive like everyone's designs will be. The way the pattern is written will be, and it'll become more standard, and you won't have those one-off patterns that are like, what did this person do? So yeah, it's helpful that we all have like one resource that we can go to. And yeah, they've got all that information about sizing and all that stuff too, which is really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's helped me so much with everything with pattern writing. I don't think I could do it without it. No. So when you include like photos like as like a mini tutorial in your pattern, like during the process, what are usually the parts of the pattern that you include those photos with? Is it like during assembly? Is it with a different stitch pattern? What do you usually do?
So in the first section before the pattern starts is my like special stitches section. So like say I'm doing like a puff stitch, and I do like 4 yarn overs and pull-ups. I'll include like photos of that. Or if I'm doing like I'm trying to think, one of my hats, I use a front post 5 double crochet together, which is like not common. So I include the photos of that and how to do that. And then as far as like in the bulk of the pattern, if there's like something tricky, or if I'm like trying to show like where, I think one of my kids just got hurt. Are you okay, Emmett? So yeah, like if there's like a tricky section, like in the bulk of the pattern, I'll add a couple photos in there too. And I usually label those like figure A, figure B, and then whatever row you're gonna like reference that to, I'll put that in parentheses after the row, like after the stitch information, just so people can have a clear idea of like what I'm trying to say. So if it's ever like something confusing, and usually like sometimes that doesn't even occur to me until after the testing phase. Like if my testers are like, this part's really tricky, or I'm not understanding this, I'll be like, okay, I need to add a photo in there. And then as far as like the end, I always include photos of like how to finish your piece. So whether it's like how to close your hat, how to put the seams on a garment, I'll have photos in there, like, and I usually do it in PowerPoint, so I'll put the photo in like a slide, and then I like draw on top of it and put like arrows and like little like I'll do like words and stuff, like, you know, seam along like the orange lines or something, so people can see, and I'll have like step-by-step photos on like how to close the top of my hat. So yeah, I definitely include a lot of pictures in my designs when it's necessary, like when I feel like it'll help like improve the pattern and help people be able to actually make it.
Yeah, I do the same thing, because I've found like when I see the photos, my brain, something just clicks, even if the photo doesn't even like completely show how to do it, but I'll at least see like, okay, this is where I'm going to put my hook, or this is where I'm going to start sewing. That just helps my brain be like, okay, I know how to do this. And then I've also started doing a lot more I'm trying to like transition doing more video tutorials, which those take a while, so that makes the garment process slower. But you know, if you I think it's a really helpful thing if people are beginners to like have that option available, because if we're visual learners, we learn by watching people, and so that's a super helpful option. But like, you don't have to do it for every pattern, because otherwise we would never get anything done.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think when I do start like really doing the videos, like it may take me a long time. Like, I don't know how, like, do you ever do ones that show like the whole process of a design?
That is what I did for my pizza, little pizza my heart. I did like a full thing, but I showed like all the main parts, and then I was like, okay, now you just work till this row, and then we'll pick up from there. And then with my crossback cardigan that I'm designing, it's a really simple one, but I've been showing all the steps of like, okay, here's the how we're going to start doing the stitch pattern on this, and then here's how you sew everything up, and here's where like, okay, now this is how we're going to do the sleeves for this. So it really just depends on like what the goal is that you want to do with the video tutorial. Like, do you just want to show assembly, or do you want to have this be like a complete beginner pattern? And like, even if it's complex, you can make it a beginner pattern by showing how to do it. Yeah, and like I said, not every pattern needs to have that, because sometimes it's just so self-explanatory. You're totally fine just having that in there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, can you guys go in the other room, please? No! Emerson, and close the door. Thank you. Oh gosh.
Cool. So we are almost done with like the time for this interview. So what would be like the last minute or like the last tips and tricks that you have for people recommending writing patterns? Or what is some of your last advice you'd give?
I think just don't let fear hold you back. And then also don't be afraid to reach out to other designers for help. I think sometimes we think, oh, these people, like, I don't know, like Instagram famous or whatever, they're not going to have time for me or they won't listen to me. You're afraid to reach out for help. And I think, like, what I've discovered is that people are more than willing to help usually. And that we have such an amazing maker community, like especially on Instagram, that we can learn from each other and help each other along the way, because it's all about community over competition. And so I think, like, don't be afraid to ask people, like, okay, I'm working on this, how do I do this? Like, because that's how you learn. You got to learn, and you got to get over that fear of not knowing or being wrong, I guess. And just go for it, and don't let that fear of messing up or failing or whatever get to you, because things can always be changed. Like, even after you've published a pattern and people have purchased it, if people find a mistake or something is out of place or something, you can always change it and make it right. So yeah, just don't let the fear hold you back.
Yeah, because I know that I've found like something that I thought made sense to me, and then I released the pattern, and then it doesn't make sense to someone else. And I did remember one other thing that I wanted to ask is, do you always, with all of your patterns, make sure that you have testers for them?
I haven't always. Like, there's a couple patterns. I think it was ones I haven't had tested. My Phoenix basket pattern has never been tested. But that one uses a graph, and so it was a lot easier to write. And there's like that visual with it. But now I'm finding, especially with garments, like, testing is so important, because like they find things that I totally have missed, even if it's just a matter of like, you didn't include a chain one in this row. I'm like, oh gosh, okay. And they'll be able to help you figure out like if your sizing is right. I think that's really important too. And that's the thing, is like testers are so valuable. Like they can provide so much information for you, and they also help market your pattern, because they want to share pictures on social media. They're going to take some pretty awesome pictures of them wearing it, so that other people can see how your design looks in multiple sizes without you having to make all of them. And so, yeah, I think the more I go, the more I'm like, no, testers are so wonderful. Like, I'm so grateful for all of the people on my tester team, because they do amazing things, and we ask so much of them, and that they're willing to take that time out of their busy lives to help you with your pattern. It only ever makes it better. Like, honestly, and that's the thing too, is like, you've got to be able to be okay with the constructive criticism, because it's going to be hard at first, I think, until you get used to the whole process of like having someone say, this part of your pattern doesn't make sense, or maybe you should change this, or or your sizing is way too big. But if you have like an open mind and you have an open heart with it, like, it's just going to make you a better pattern writer and a better designer. So, yeah, I highly recommend.
Yeah. Pattern testers, they are so invaluable. I definitely recommend using them. And I found that when you just say, hey, does anyone want to test this pattern for me? You'll even get people who don't even follow you on social media will be like, yeah, I'd love to test it for you. And you're like, okay, cool. That's great.
Who love that. They love to do that. They kind of get like a first look at your pattern. They get to make it first before everyone else. And yeah, they're great. And so when you find a good one, hold on to them, treat them well, because they can make all the difference and taking your pattern from like an okay pattern to like a superb pattern. So yeah, I agree. And I think that's an awesome way to end our episode, is use testers. Don't be afraid of going for it, and just keep having fun with it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love getting to chat with you, and now you can go give your son some candy for being so patient.
Thanks for having.
Of course. It was so much fun getting to chat, and I can't wait to like officially meet in person at OML. That's going to be so much fun.
So excited.
Yay! Well, have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later on Instagram.
All right. Bye, Claire.
Bye!
Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like it below if you enjoyed watching it, and hit the subscribe button if you never want to miss out a video from me, and also check out my other videos and tutorials on my channel. See you next time!